carry word to David and to carry on the high priestly family, Abiathar. So this is a historical event that we're probably inclined to think, how important can this be? And yet suddenly we realize this is really a historic moment in Israel. Who's the true king? Will the priesthood of God survive? What is going on here? It reminds us that really none of the stories in the Bible, none of the events in the Bible are really trivial. They're all preserved for us for a very specific point. I remember reading that in the early part of the 20th century, the leading liberal Protestant preacher in the country was Harry Emerson Fosdick. And his most famous sermon was, "Shall the Fundamentalists Win?" And it was a call to arms by the liberals to stop the terrible fundamentalists from winning in the churches. In another sermon, Fosdick rather famously said, "Who cares who the Jebusites were?" Well, we might well say today, who cares who Doeg the Edomite was? Well, God cares. And again, this is not just history of somebody else long ago. This is our history. As Christians, we're connected to this history. And David saw it important enough that he wrote a psalm reflecting on it. I've rehearsed this history. Most of the time, we don't know a lot about the history that stands behind Psalms. Occasionally, we're given a hint. Here, we're given a fairly specific statement about that history. But the more history we know, the more it gives us the context of the Psalm. And notice how the Psalm begins. "Why do you boast of evil, O mighty man?" So there's the scene set for us. It's a scene of evil. Evil done, evil boasted about. That's what's happening here. And then when we think of Doeg, I think probably there's something ironic, derisive. "O mighty man." Remember the men who escorted David and were his soldiers were referred to as David's mighty men. I think the chief herdsman was probably not really a mighty man. There's a little joke here, a little needling of Doeg. We don't know what happened to Doeg. He disappears from history after he kills. But, how brave a man was it to kill 85 unarmed priests and then lead soldiers back to Nob to kill women and children there? This was a vicious act. For what purpose? Saul had promised him money. Saul had promised him money. Remember Psalm 49? It's only 4 Psalms earlier. What's he going to do with all that wealth? What became of it? Well, this psalm, you see, is reflecting in this profound way about the truth. The Psalms are always helping us see the truth. Why do you boast of evil, O mighty man? The steadfast love of God endures all day. Now, if you have an NIV, your NIV would read very differently. I think the ESV is much to be preferred here. The Hebrew literally says what the ESV has translated, the steadfast love of God endures all the day. The NIV slightly repointed the text because they thought the steadfast love of God endures all day doesn't fit here. But that's sometimes the point in the Psalms. Remember, we talked about artful variation. Sometimes one line repeats another line, but sometimes one line stands in contrast to another line. And I think that's what's happening here at the opening. There's this evil of this mighty man contrasted with the steadfast love of God that endures all the day. Then returning to the mighty man, your tongue plots destruction. Like a sharp razor, you worker of deceit. You see how intimately this ties into the history, how we have to know the history to see, not to appreciate the psalm at all, but to really grasp how pointed this is as a memory of David. You know, some people ask, did David really write any of these psalms? And I think he did. And I think this is one that shows that intimate touch and connection with the events being described. Verse 3, you love evil more than good, and lying more than speaking what is right. It's interesting how frequently the Psalms turn to the subject of truth and lying, and how destructive the tongue is, how destructive lies are, how important the truth is. And that's what's being talked about here, that the lie has seriously led to death and to destruction. Lies are not innocent things. Lies are not light things, but they have huge and tragic consequences. You love evil more than good, and lying more than speaking what is right. There's no doubt that Doeg had lied to Saul about the involvement of the priests. That is what complicated this whole scene. And so it's a tragic scene. It's a terrible scene. You love all words that devour, O deceitful tongue. And you see, that history shows what a devouring had taken place. Dozens of people wiped out because of Doeg. And then really coming to the center of the psalm, but God will break you down forever. David, in the midst of this carnage, turns to the theme of God's justice, of God's judgment, of God bringing right into the world. He will snatch and tear you from your tent. He will uproot you from the land of the living. The righteous shall see and fear and shall laugh at him. How do you feel about that? You know, this is, again, one of those images that sometimes we just move quickly over. And other times we ponder, what are we to make of this? However bad Doeg is, if he's snatched and torn from his tent and uprooted from the land of the living, should we laugh at that? Yes, we should.